Okay, we're officially at noon. Hello, everyone. We're going to give it a few more minutes so folks can start pouring in and getting comfortable. But we're really excited for today's session. Definitely see folks coming in. We'll give it one more minute, then we'll get started. Okay. First of all, we're super excited to be hosting the second AI Governance Practically. This is a monthly webinar series where we feature some of the best and brightest in both GRC and security. And really, this is a session for folks like you, folks on both on our speaker list and for folks attending, where this is really stories from the front lines from you folks who really just want to share with peers and really have some kind of earnest takeaway versus, theoretical approaches or, high level vague adaptations. So this is really a series for you. We're excited that you're here, and we're really looking forward to the conversations that we're having today. So the format of this is pretty simple. We have 10-minute lightning talks with some awesome practitioners here. We will save Q&A at the end. It'll be about 15 minutes. So please do not hesitate to throw questions in the chat and Q&A. We will get to them. And then, as always, we are really earnestly looking for topics that you want to hear from, because this is a series for you. So we will have a poll at the end that gets deep into what you want to hear, and please share that. Now, I'm going to do just a quick run through, and then I will let each speaker introduce themselves during their session. We're joined today by three amazing practitioners. We have Princess, Chad, and Josh. They're going to cover a little bit more about what they're talking about, but in the interest of time and making sure that we give them enough time for their topics, we'll have them fully introduce themselves and their quick hits in their topic. And for me, my name is Gwen Betts. I am the co-founder and Chief Experience and Marketing Officer here at Maro, the sponsor and host of this webinar series, and really looking forward to both hearing from you folks and being the Q&A moderator at the end. Now, before we kick off, we typically like to ask a few questions and have a few polls. Given that AI governance is sort of the topic du jour and the whole point of this webinar, we want to know from the folks in the audience if they have a formal AI governance program in place today. And we'll keep this open for just a few minutes and then move on. Oh, interesting answers. It's equally split right now. Honestly, if you want, for folks who answered either way, give us a little more details in the chat as well if you're open to it. We'd love to hear from you. Okay, so officially, I'm going to hand over to Princess.
Amazing. Hello. Thanks, Gwen. Hi, everyone. I'm glad to be here. For those who do not know me, my name is Princess Okoro. I run the Security Governance, Risk and Compliance function at Trainline. We are currently UK's leading train booking platform, connecting millions of passengers to rail travel across Europe and beyond Europe as well. And when I'm not working, I publish a newsletter called AI GRC Techs, where I help practitioners to use, govern, and stay ahead of AI in GRC. And I also provide practical examples around AI use cases for GRC teams and on how they can actually govern AI adoption at an enterprise scale. Obviously, it's no secret that every and most organizations right now are at a race to adopt AI. And GRC teams are being asked to keep up, or better yet, lead those conversations. And oftentimes I do get questions around how do we, or how can we use AI in GRC? And my honest answer is always, before we talk about AI, we need to understand where we sit, our processes, etc. Because what I'm currently saying now is most of the conversations around AI in GRC jump straight to automation, prompt tools, etc. And this is where the mistake lies, because we are talking about automation before we actually ask whether we have the processes in place that is ready to be automated. So in a nutshell, this is the gap I want to close in the next 10 minutes. That's obviously my mission overall is to turn GRC from being a blocker really to a data-driven enabler that can help security team move faster and focus on decisions that actually matter. So before AI can help, we need to be clear on what we are trying to automate, because the reality is most people just go straight to automation without understanding what the GRC function does or how the GRC is structured. Just in case if you're new to the GRC space, the way I would define GRC, governance, risk, and compliance, is a conduit between security and the wider business. So it owns the framework to manage risk, audits, control implementation while building governance, security, and an awareness culture. On the screen, what I have illustrated is the way my team is structured. So I currently manage a team of 4 that sits across the different work streams. So we have governance and policy management, risk management, third-party risk management, compliance, and security awareness. And each of this work stream has its own workflow, its own evidence requirements, and its own readiness level. And the bone of contention here is AI lands differently across these individual work streams. So knowing where to start really matters. And when ownership is clearly defined across the work stream, the business kind of wins, and it's kind of easier to know where AI becomes beneficial here. So this is the framework I use. Just before I go into the framework, I just want to give a shout out to Ayub Fandi. The AI GRC decks kind of started from the conversation we had during VantaCon. So just a shout out to him, by the way. So this is the framework I use, and this is what I write about every week. So this helps GRC team to figure out where they are and what to do next. So what I've mapped out here is 4 different tiers. So we're looking at tier 0, tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. And you need to understand where you currently sit in order for you to know where AI can be beneficial, or if AI is actually what you need at this moment. So at tier 0, which is the manual of operation, this is where most GRC teams are actually right now. So most of the process is ad hoc, it is person dependent, it is undocumented. Processes kind of lives in someone's head, a spreadsheet that no one knows where it exists, an email chain from 3 or 5 years ago, and there's no level of repeatability at tier 0. And then at tier 1, this is where most teams think they are. But ideally, your process needs to be documented. You need to have some basic workflow in place. So before AI existed, Jira tickets obviously, someone could raise a Jira ticket and then it's flagged to the right owner. So you have your basic workflow. The outcomes are predictable. And the honest take here is for you to actually leverage AI, this is kind of the prerequisite that you need to be in your GRC maturity journey. And before, obviously, you can say you've got like a structured process, you need to answer 6 questions, i.e., for example, which is who owns the controls, what evidence is acceptable, what policy requirement maps to which risk, what triggers an escalation, where does human review remain mandatory, because the reality is that AI can't solve our problems, all our problems, right? And what output is decision useful versus just a document being completed. If you can answer those 6 questions, I think you need to go back to the manual, the drawing board, and document your processes, etc. The next stage, which is the AI-assisted operations, this is where I think most teams are testing or currently trying out at the moment. So this is where, with the right context, with the right workflow, with the right prompt structure, you could use, for example, ChatGPT, etc., to ask basic questions within a defined parameter of your within GRC. So this excels currently in evidence analysis, pattern recognition, and intelligence is bounded based on the instructions that you either give the AI, and the outcomes are quite explainable. So here, the human initiates the tasks, reviews the output, and owns the final decision every time. Then the final tier, which is the autonomous, the kind of the frontier. And the mistake that I keep seeing, and this is not just a GRC problem. So whilst I write about AI use cases in GRC, this is just an example within other functions as well, where we are trying to move to tier 3 without understanding our data, without having defined processes, etc. So at this level, AI makes autonomous decisions. There's no predefined workflow. The agents kind of decide what the next step is dynamically, and the paths are kind of unpredictable. So rather than obviously jumping straight into, for example, integrating with Claude, etc., building agent and whatnot, you probably need to understand where you currently are in your process, because at the end of the day, whatever you feed into AI is what's going to spit out. So garbage in, garbage out. So in some instance, you might not really need it. So yeah, you just need to define your process and understand who owns what. So the key takeaway for this slide is, if your GRC function is struggling to adopt AI, it's kind of mostly a procedural and structural problem, and you need to probably go back to the drawing board. So this is an example of a couple of examples of how AI can be useful at a tier 2. So obviously, I'd mentioned the previous 5 work streams within policy, management, risk, etc. So for example, within a policy and governance management, etc., you could leverage AI for like gap analysis, control mapping, policy redlining, policy Q&A. So currently in my organization, we've created a GPT within ChatGPT where all our policies are loaded on there, and obviously anyone can use that GPT and ask questions. So rather than messaging us on Slack, you could say, what vendor is categorized as high risk, for example, and you kind of get the answer. So what this has done in this instance is the time that it takes to go back and forth, you kind of have the first pass of what the answer looks like in a non-technical friendly manner. Within risk assessments or risk management, AI is quite useful here as well. It can be used for risk register drafting, risk analysis, risk scoring, prioritization, scenario brainstorming. There was a risk assessment that was recently conducted where obviously we had to look at a couple of vulnerability findings. Historically, that would have taken who knows how long, a really long time. But obviously, AI did the insight quite quickly as opposed to someone doing that manually. Within third-party risk management, obviously, AI can be leveraged within questionnaire review, vendor risk summarization, due diligence, initial triaging, and categorizing what is a high-risk vendor, medium, etc., based on the data or the impact that is being fed, that's being completed by the end user. And then within compliance operation, this is kind of what's kind of popular in the market currently, where obviously you've got automated evidence collection, control cross-referencing, etc. And finally, for security awareness, AI can be leveraged within obviously drafting specific training content, phishing scenarios. We currently have an agent that obviously gets news on threats around AI, because obviously my company, they're trying to be frontier when it comes to AI. So keeping abreast to the risk, the incident is quite important as well. So the borderline here is, one thing to take out of this slide is, there is no single prompts, right? There's no single workflow that can fix your process. This is what currently works for us. And it might be for person B, for like John, etc. Your program is structured differently. So you need to probably take a step back to understand how is your function divided? What are the things that will be beneficial? It could be, for example, reducing the time it takes to respond to like a Jira ticket, doing some automatic logic to where tickets go to. That could save like 30%. So the way I see it is, you start from where you are currently and then progress through the journey. So by this year, maybe my team's goal would be, we want to get back our time by 30%. And what that means is it saved us our time, because the average GRC team is under-resourced. So wherever we could leverage AI, we always try to do that. So, so this is a real example of something that was built, recently, called the GRC Policy Reviewer Agent. So this currently sits at a tier 2. And just to make this concrete, one of the problems that every GRC team knows is policies compile, they pile up, etc. You could have 50 policies or so that needs reviewing. Review happens annually at best, and nobody really takes time to review those documents. Because imagine being assigned, I'm assigned like a team member to review like 10 policies, right? And with other things that they need to do. And obviously this slips through, not because of people can't do their job, but because the volume is too high and the process is manual. So for example, we had a policy that had kind of gone through the multiple review cycle. It looked fine. But as part of our process, what was built was a policy reviewer agent. So I built this, and for example, we ran this with for example, information security classification policy, and it found, for example, missing clauses, controls that mapping that did not exist, or gaps within our control mapping, and some instances of ambiguous and weak wording that we had done the review and no one has seen, and a high risk finding that was attributed to PCI DSS. So ideally, if the auditor would have done a good job, that would have been flagged, etc. And this did this within like a minute or 2 minutes, etc. And this saved us a lot of time. But here is what made it work. I did not just upload a policy and say, where are the gaps? The agents was built around our specific workflow. So in the image there, you could see that it is connected to Microsoft Suite on SharePoint, where our policies document sits. Atlassian Rover is the agent that's within Confluence and Jira, etc. And then we've got, you can either upload a file, etc. And we've got a reference to our policy checklist. So we gave it a narrow job and connected it to a system where our policies live. You could be like a Google shop and the instance might be different for you, or maybe your company does not use ChatGPT at the moment. It is quite different. So this agent was built using ChatGPT agents, and this is like a feature that came out like a few months ago. I think in May or April, I can't remember. But what this did for us was, based on those structured output that the guardrails that we put in place, so telling it what to do, but most importantly, what not to do, we're able to do, like, for example, those policies review quicker and in a much better time than it would have taken us without this. So this is just a use case on how AI can be quite useful here as well. So there is a link in the chat, I think, just where you can answer like a couple of questions to understand where your GRC team sits, because before you go ahead to procure it, a tool or connect to Claude, ChatGPT, it's quite good to understand where this sits, etc., just so you know where to put in your effort. Because the reality is, you probably might need to define your processes before actually leveraging AI first. And I don't know if anyone has completed that.
See 7 clicks, so people are hopping in there to take it. It takes about 3 minutes. Just
and Princess, you are a woman after my own heart, given that you're providing tools to help people baseline where they're at. So yeah, love seeing the proactiveness around creating tools.
Amazing, thank you. I think once you've gotten the outputs of that, it just kind of give you like a high level advice on what you need to do. But as I said previously, this use case is specific to the way the team I lead is structured. It might be different for your organization. So the premise here is taking a step back really and understanding how your team is structured, what's the most beneficial stuff. It might be that you get a lot of third-party requests and you need AI to do the initial triaging and create insights. And that would save time, right? You just need to understand what you need now and what you need to do in the next 6 months, etc. So you probably would have gotten your answers. If you want to share it on the chats, that would be good. By the way, oh, I see some tier 1s, a couple of tier 3. That's good. I would like to know what that is. But just before I leave, just one thing just to reiterate as well. AI will not fix like a weak GRC process. It will only accelerate it. So garbage in, garbage out. So if you forget everything that I said, AI would not solve all your problem if you do not go back to the drawing board and define what your processes are. In case you want to find me online, that's the link to my LinkedIn, Princess David Okoro, and my newsletter is called the AI GRFC Text. Thank you.
And then we will also be sharing all these resources and everyone's contact contact like LinkedIn, newsletter, post webinar, and in an email. Awesome. Thank you, Princess.
Right.
Okay, I come from the automation world as well. So my take here always, we said it in SOAR days, it's true for AI, which is like even better SOAR, right? +1, if you have weak process, if you don't even know what your process is, AI isn't going to do anything for it. So I think it's really wise advice for those listening and, really where people are at in their journey. With that, Chad, time for you.
Yes. All right. So let's go ahead and get that going. So I'm Chad Brustin. Been doing this security and IT for about 16 years, 12 in the energy efficiency space, 2 in the warranty space, and another 2.5 in the fintech space. And I'm now doing consulting and readiness assessments. So we can talk about that. There's a lot of tools that are exciting and accessible that I'm going to talk about. And a lot of the way that folks think about security is not the way that I'm going to present today. The way that that I think we should start thinking about security is through a threat model. And there's ShowStack's 4 basic questions. What are we working on? What can go wrong? What are we doing about it? And did we do a good job? And so I think that's where you start. And I would say that there's a good document that I've got a link to in the slide that basically gives for each of those questions kind of the AI component that would be good to focus on, because there's a lot with AI. We have a lot of new things that keep changing all the time, and so the attack surface continues to grow. So in this model, it's kind of organic. I'm going to start with this Thoughtworks Build Your Own Radar, which is basically a different way of looking at your AI and software inventory and tool inventory to get to what is in scope for your SOC 2 or your ISO 27001. Once you have things identified, then you need to measure it in order to move it and manage it. And so we'll go into 2 tools, IriusRisk, which is a accessible way to do threat modeling, both by uploading a document or by a chat through their chat model, being able to just type in what you think is the product team's working on today. So we don't have any documentation, but let's take their use cases and their epic and let's type that in. And then finally with Maro, being able to enforce those policies in real time. And this is links, of course, to each of those different components, and I'll do a demo just so you can actually see how to bring it all together, starting with the blips on the radar, where they are in the assessment, whether they're being tried out or they're fully mature within the organization, and then taking that, looking at the data flow diagram, looking at your kind of how data moves through the system, looking at input, process, and output, and then understanding, really getting to the meat of what is this AI tool doing in my environment, and going towards other things like authentication, input and output sanitization, making sure that we're not trusting the things that people are putting into our models. And then essentially, can that model be hijacked? Are we scanning the model upon download? Things like that, because there are serialization attacks that are associated with some of the models that are out there. So we want to make sure we're protecting our internal customers, our coworkers, because they know data science, we understand security. So I'm going to show you first the radar, then I'll show you a kind of a use case with the IriusRisk's Jeff AI using a chatbot. And then basically, once you have that chatbot diagrammed, we'll drill into IriusRisk, and I'll show you exactly how to use that and MITRE ATTACK MITRE ATLAS, framework. And let me go ahead and share my screen so we can get to the important stuff over here. And all of this is in the slides, so I think that there's links to this as well, and you can reach out to me and I'm happy to walk you through it. So there's, the first is a Thoughtworks Radar, and with instructions on how to build it. Essentially, you can use their template, make a copy like I did. And essentially, this is a different take at your inventory with the different ways to categorize it. And then you put the link in here and you push build your radar. And that's what I've got here. So this is a one for, a good idea or a good template, I should say, to show you how this all works. Techniques, tools, languages, and platforms. Better than a spreadsheet, kind of a nice visual model. And let's drill in to see where we're at with our tools. So we've got MITRE ATLAS, we've got Model Scan, LLM Guard, some tools that are out there that are free that you can use to basically protect your AI use internally. And essentially, the biggest thing I would say is on the things that are in the caution area, let's put together a project that sunsets that component. Do we turn off DNS? Did we shut down that S3 bucket? Is that model still have credentials that are out there? Are there tokens floating around? So all the basics in blocking and tackling that come up with just understanding kind of what's in your environment. How does data flow through it, and looking at input, process, and output. And then going forward, how do my policies align with what I'm actually doing operationally? Getting into third-party risk. Is that vendor that's on this list, have we looked at their SOC 2? Do they have a security program? Has that been approved, or does it need to be approved by the architectural review committee? And then more importantly, and I'll show you here, as an example, this is a chat bot that we have basically generated from a few use cases. So looking at the model, I can go ahead and quickly generate documentation and a threat model. So I'll show you how that works. So here's an example where we have a threat model, and the diagram is generated from typing in, a use case, typing in an epic. You can go in here and click in. Here we've got a chatbot agent, AI chatbot engine agent. As an example, it tells you how to protect yourself against that. You can also click some buttons up here that generate some kind of top 10 lists or the easiest wins. So out of the gate, by talking to some folks on your product team or your engineering team, you can take a use case or two, type it into the Jeff AI model in IriusRisk, and start looking at ways to protect yourself. And you don't have to do it all at once. You can do a few different sessions to look at these different items, get them on a Jira board, create a bunch of tickets so that you can show an auditor for your ISO 27001 or your SOC 2 that you're making progress over time. And so here's an API, a chatbot API gateway. So once again, there's a lot here with AI in your environment. So let's slow things down, look at what recommendations are out there. You're not going to catch them all by doing it yourself. So use the tools that are out there. And that's going to lead me to my next part, which is MITRE ATLAS, which is a good framework for looking at different tactics and techniques, and essentially being able to go through and do some self evaluation to really test yourself, because you're going to assume that the bad actors are out there testing your environment, trying to poison your model, trying to poison your training data. So we want to make sure that we're doing all the things that we can to protect ourselves. So let's use the tools that are out there. So I can use a lot of the tools. If I'm using just an enterprise model, I can click on that, just essentially go out, and it reduces the things that are available for a bad actor to use. Or I can go in here and type in which is the knowledge graph. I can type in API and essentially look at what might be available here for the bad actor to use against us. So I can go and click on here. I'll click over here for time reasons. And I can go ahead and this is a second check on my work. So I've generated the threat model. I've generated a diagram, generated some documentation. Now I'm going into Atlas and I'm going and checking my work, and I can talk to the DevOps team and confirm how ingress and egress happens within our environment, and make sure that we've got our environment locked down so that we don't have excessive privilege for that API. Excuse me, for that API. The AI may have write access to an S3 bucket or to a database. I want to understand how that works, so that one, if it does something that it shouldn't, I can either kill that AI process, or I can look for network traffic that shouldn't happen. So if there's traffic going to an outside website that shouldn't, we would have better telemetry, better ideas around that. I think that's really it. I'm going to go and stop sharing my screen now, but I think that, where did the presentation go? There it is. All right. So there's your next steps. Drill into the countermeasures. You can export the threat model from the IriusRisk tool. Export that diagram, export a spreadsheet, bring that into your change control, into your ticketing system, and then create projects that the security team and or the development team can work on that can show progress over time and then meet the requirements of that control. And then also the best thing about IriusRisk is there is free training about threat modeling that you can do on your own time to learn more about kind of the what and the how for basically protecting your organization. And once again, these are great tools. A lot of the times we don't have all of the answers, but this is a way to get there and get back to basics by locking down how AI is being used in your environment, and then showing that work both to your executive committee, your architecture committee, as well as using it as a way to educate your team that are focused on what they're focused on. So this will help you be a subject matter expert. And then I'll leave you with the way to get back to basics by using these accessible tools, and links to reach out to connect with me about any questions that you have. Thank you.
Chad, I love how thorough this is. And coming from the SOC world previously, I think one of the challenges we had with working with more greener security teams or even IT folks who are responsible for security is they don't understand even how to threat model in the first place. They're not even starting from their environment. They're actually starting from like an atlas and trying to work backwards versus baselining what's in your environment and what are the real threats. So I think this is a super practical approach for people to get started with threat modeling, and threat modeling specifically with AI.
Yeah. Yep, and the radar helps with just getting to what are those hidden factories? What are people using in the in our environment that are helping to solve business problems? How do we put guardrails around that so that we can innovate? Yeah, so.
Yeah, because that's your priority then, right? It's not just kind of like a la carte or like pick your own adventure. It is actually contextualized to the business risk. Awesome. Okay, Josh, I'm going to hand it over to you now. Speaking the language of the business.
Josh, I think you may be on mute.
I was going to say that. I was going to turn off my headphones first.
How are we doing now?
Much
We
better.
can hear you. Perfect.
Hi, I'm Josh Mason. I swear I'm not new to technology. I think I just had a loose cable and it swapped. I'm Josh Mason, the founder and lead consultant at Mason Security Consulting. And one of my big focuses is on communication. So a little about me. Well, something that I have learned and identified is that the hardest part of most people's day is talking to other people. It's been that way since the beginning of time. It's why we have HR departments, why we have salespeople, and why we have couples therapists. Dale Carnegie built entire courses and a foundation around one idea. Getting through to another person is a skill and it can be learned. His advice was simple: talk in terms of the other person's interests, not your own. If you hold on to that, I'll talk about how we end up using it. Because Princess and Chad just walked you through some maturity models and frameworks. I want to talk to you about the part that has to work before any of that gets funded, or before you get the time to work on it at all, or even starting just the discussion with leadership. How we talk about these concepts with the business. I started my career as an Air Force pilot. I spoke the lingo. I was part of the beast that is the Air Force. And then after nearly a decade, I moved into cybersecurity. And cybersecurity has a whole different language. And that's one of the parts that took me the longest to learn. Not the language. Frankly, Security Plus and CISSP are language courses and language exams, in my opinion. They teach people the language of cybersecurity. But rather, how do we branch that? How do we be translators? My boss, when I was still in the Air Force at the Special Operations Communication Squadron, was essentially the CISO, and his boss was essentially the CEO of a 7,000 person organization. Obviously, inputs from outside of the base, but they drove what happened most of day to day. Both of them came up in the Air Force. Both of them spoke Air Force fluently, but they had different dialects. Where the wing commander, pilot, most commanders and generals in the Air Force are pilots. They think about getting people downrange to do the job. And my boss, the commander of the communications squadron, essentially this is a thought in terms of audits and vulnerabilities and risk. And they would clash. I found myself often sitting in the middle of the gap of the two of them, trying to figure things out. And because of my background, I ended up taking the commander, essentially the CEO's position often. And I was actually even told by my boss that he didn't see me having a future in cybersecurity. I went to go teach, and then I got out of the Air Force, and then I taught cybersecurity and worked my way into sales and consulting, because there is a big need for this communication. What we missed back then was the translation. How does what we're doing affect what the organization is going after? I've started to teach people how to do the same things that I've learned. How do we translate our needs and the company's needs and identify that they're the same, and then put that into the messaging? One of the hardest things for most cybersecurity folks is we want to teach the cybersecurity lingo to leadership. We want CEOs and CFOs and COOs to speak security. They're not going to. They took MBA courses. They've been running organizations. They're going to speak like business people. And it's similar to Americans going to Mexico and being angry when they don't speak English. You showed up there, that's what they speak. If you need to operate in that area, you want to speak to them, you have to learn how they speak and translate needs into what they need. Their language is revenue, it's profit and loss, it's market share. I myself have grabbed an MBA along the way before I got my Security Plus, before I got my CISP. And I tend to think in that mindset of how is this going to affect our revenue and our market share? Whatever you're doing with threat hunting, with your maturity models for your AI. And I ran into this recently with one of my customers. We were actually having to make some of that translation for cyber insurance. This was not even internal to my client's company, but to the greater, to the brokerage firm and the underwriters on what cybersecurity was doing, not just to meet business needs, but how are we putting guardrails and safeguards in place so that we wouldn't have not just a breach, but errors, hallucinations, and issues down the line. Let me talk about the customer a little bit, my client, so you understand where they're coming from. They have a SaaS platform for medical practitioners, and they just had a big deal come through or opportunity show up. And one of the big questions wasn't, they were asking for a SOC 2. We don't have that yet. We're working on, they're a fresh customer. I just started with them. We have a lot to do to get to that point. But all of that was requested, a security questionnaire, but then also what is covered under their E&O, errors and omissions, and cyber insurance. Because their customer didn't want to tie on for a 6-figure, 7-figure deal with the possibility of them facing issues down the line as the SaaS bugs become a problem for them. So this is a big deal. Having the right things in place determined whether they were going to get insurance, whether they were going to be able to afford insurance to then take the opportunity and get market share. And that is the crucial piece for them. For them to continue to be a company, they have to sell their product and people have to want it. The joy of that is they now know that they're going to get security questionnaires. They need cyber insurance. They need E&O. And since they utilize AI agents in their SaaS product, they know that there needs to be guardrails. There needs to be contextualization. And a lot of the tools that Chad just shared with us, you can go see all of the possibilities there through Thoughtworks. It's a great radar, by the way, to identify what's in place. For my client, it's a healthcare tool dealing with HIPAA, a HIPAA breach, both for the software and then their customers down the line, the offices who are using this tool. If they have a HIPAA breach, they also are going to be facing possible fines and notifications and losing trust with their patients. And it has that domino effect. So we had to describe how the company and the developers are utilizing Arise and Google Vertex for some contextualization, setting specific models context models in place to ensure that they were taking information not from in general and creating ideas and hallucinating, but looking at schedules, looking at the information that is available for the different customers, for the patients rather, and giving suggestions for times and billing from their files specifically, making sure that everything going out to the insurance companies is thorough rather than filling things in off of just create rather than the AI creating something, if that makes sense. So limiting inputs, checking outputs, a lot of those tools. And so fortunately, my customer already had a lot of those in place before I showed up and started a HIPAA assessment for them. But we were able to have a discussion on where are we going with this and what will we also face in possible incident response if there was a breach. How would they deal with things if a client had some sort of HIPAA breach while utilizing the software, and how that would affect them? Work that into incident response plans, tie that to the insurance, got all of that in place. And the point of the or the way that I was able to speak to the customer, to my client, was based around them having an opportunity. I have been talking to them since January about the importance of having cyber insurance and having E&O insurance. And the can kind of got kicked down the lane until an opportunity arose where they weren't going to make revenue. They weren't going to get market share. They weren't going to be able to take on this new client without having those things in place. If I had started earlier on discussing these are the things that your clients are going to be looking for, and you're not going to be competitive in the market without having them in place, we probably would have had the conversation back in January or February rather than middle of June. And there always is trying to know how much pressure to put on your clients and how fast to work them through their cyber maturity. But the way that you approach these is critical. I am a huge fan of Dale Carnegie. I'm autistic, and I don't naturally know how to interact with other folks. Fortunately, 40 years of life, a lot of training, and books like How to Win Friends and Influence People have taught me that if you start by talking about what the other person is interested in and try to get them to say yes to what you're saying. Hey, you want to make this big 6-figure deal? Yes, we do. All right, they're asking for cyber insurance and a policy of at least this much, right? Yes, they are. We got 2 yeses. Okay, in order to do that, let's put in place some tooling. Let me look at some frameworks and figure out what is our overall maturity look like and where does it need to be in order to protect yourself better. They go, okay, well, yeah, spend some of the retainer hours figuring that out over the next couple of weeks. And rather than coming out with, hey, I think you need this, if we build from the things that they're interested in, that they're aiming towards, it makes it go a lot faster. They're going to nod their heads. They're going to say, yes, move on this. You can use that. If you're curious about how to get Maro in place, if you're curious about how to start working with leadership to have a maturity model, work from what your leadership is interested in and move from there. That's my 2 cents and what I've learned. It'll help with your security roadmap. It'll increase trust. And then you'll be able to grow together both with your leadership or with your client's leadership. And in the end, they're going to be happy because it will lead to more sales. All right. If you've got more questions about this, I'm on LinkedIn. You can find me at masonsc.com. And I do have a book, How to Speak Security with a Business Accent. It's out there. And yeah, thanks.
Josh, first of all, excellent as always. And I love how a lot of what you were speaking to also related to Princess's and Chad's point of view, and even getting the at-bat to put together a GRC program or even a security program, right? I think what we'll do is we'll move on to Q&A. And I actually have a question directly for you, Josh, so you don't have to mute. So I kind of read your bullet points, and obviously here at Maro, we're really, really invested in AI governance. And it seems like insurance is really filling the gap in the primary adoption driver for AI governance. Where do you actually think AI regulation is going to fit into this picture?
It's a very interesting one. My bet, the Europeans are going to lead on that, and then probably big states like California and New York. That's where a lot of the privacy, requirements have come in the past, and frankly, yeah, getting things through, other means, whether it's the FEC or the SEC, have possibilities with them. But I think a lot is going to end up coming down to having to make sales and having to have trust. Folks rightly don't trust AI. It's useful. It's great. It gets a lot done for us. It speeds up a lot of research and a lot of creative energy for some folks, but it isn't perfect. And identifying that if you've got AI either being used in your organization or as part of your product, you are going to get asked how you're dealing with it. And it's either going to be sales or it's going to be insurance that's going to drive how are we managing and regulating these things. I wouldn't expect a big brother to come down and say it must be done this way.
Fair point. And I actually think, at least in the US, that's what we're seeing too, right?
Yeah.
I'd actually open that question up to Princess as well, given that you are based in the UK and you run GRC for Trainline. What's your perception on where AI regulation will fit into this picture?
I think when it comes to regulation, I think it starts with Europe first before it gets pushed out. Currently, from a regulatory perspective, I guess obviously everyone is focused on the EU AI Act, right, which is going to be effective. There was supposed to be an obligation to start in August, but that was moved to next year, where you need to have, at a bare minimum, understand the use case, right, so AI use case, etc., and understand which is high risk and whatnot. So there's going to be an onus on organization to do like the work really to understand what these agents are doing, what AI are doing as well. And it has become trickier because it's not just a conversation about ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, etc. It is, for example, what Smith's legal application uses an AI functionality. Notion has an MCP, etc. So they are AI capabilities integrated within existing tools. So this is why there's a need for most companies to actually take AI governance seriously beyond just having a policy in place.
Makes sense. And then Chad, not to leave you out, I have one question for you as well. Assuming somebody is starting from scratch, your framework I think is an excellent start, but assuming they're starting from scratch and they could really only do one thing, what would you advise?
Yeah, I think you really want to get your universe of tools kind of laid out so that you understand what the likelihood and impact of the risk is. Then you can start talking to subject matter experts internally and kind of understand what is being built in in the environment, both product wise as well as internal tools. And then you can actually start talking to legal and do we have the right licenses? Does the data go with the person instead of the organization? Do our licenses train the model, or do we have an enterprise license that keeps our intellectual property internal? So, I mean, forget security. First things first. Let's get an understanding of what people are using, how are they using it, what are they solving for, and then how do we put some protections in place to do things safely so that we can move faster.
Love it.
Yeah.
And Princess, we actually do have a question for you now. What's the next frontier in AI governance that will dictate how security and GRC teams engage with AI adoption over the next few years?
That's my
It's always the fun one. What's the future hold?
I think it's an interesting one because obviously the main conversation now is how do you manage AI agents, right? So we've gone from generative AI where you just use ChatGPT to ask and answer questions. And now things are now autonomous in nature. So you're giving agents similar permission that employees would have. And historically, most companies do not even have identity and access management in place, right? So I guess one of the frontiers would be trying to operationalize AI governance as opposed to just having like a policy, a committee, a RACI, etc., to be able to keep up with the pace at which AI is moving. Because currently, if I'm being honest, obviously you've got your AI governance committee that sits monthly, you've got a policy that someone accepts, but there's nothing that most organizations have in place really to, to serve as like a control really on how, like who pays what information, etc. So I guess the frontier really would be to make sure that we have our controls in place, the typical controls that we have not implemented for 5 years, DLP, access control, identity access management, just so that as the model moves, we are ready to obviously manage based on the controls we have in place.
And by the way, to that point, Princess, I think like what you were talking about, Josh, when it actually comes to insurance are the drivers right now of saying like, it's not enough to have a committee. It's not enough to have a policy. You have to have enforceable controls and show that you're demonstrating some kind of guardrails in place too, right?
Yeah, you will see higher premiums or rejections without certain things in place.
Awesome.
And for the security professionals, that's great. We have things that we've been wanting people to do.
Yeah,
gives
I
you a
mean, for
little
better or
bit
worse,
factor.
this will help us, yeah, like actually get budget to do the things we need to. So on your front, Josh, you're right, like learning how to frame the need from the perspective of how it impacts the business, either the bottom line or the top line, is ultimately what will get us budget for these kinds of programs that we know we need to run, right?
Yep.
Okay, well, we are officially at time. I want to thank every single one of our excellent speakers. So much knowledge, treasure trove. We will again be resharing. We will share this recording. You should, given that you're on this webinar already, get an automatic recording, but we will follow up with the highlights and tidbits from the webinar itself. And then before we officially end, I know Meg put up a poll on rating the session and then what you would like to hear or see in the next session, which again, we're monthly. We will be back. Oh, we did that already. And then just a quick blurb about Maro. So we are a security guardian and a semantic DLP that helps you guide and protect your people while they're using both AI and SaaS tools. How we work is we ingest and we deploy your security policy. We make it real. So a lot of what these folks have talked about is paper policy isn't enforceable. We actually take your policy in plain English, put it into our policy engine, it gets deployed. And then with the observable telemetry that we see people, operating with tools, we're actually able to intercept and course correct risky behavior, like sharing something that shouldn't be shared, before they actually expose you or your company. And of course, because we're in security, we really care about privacy and keeping data in your org. So the way that we work today is we operate local SLMs directly in the browser, and we're working towards agentic coverage as well, so that all the data stays in your environment and with your people. If you at all have this problem or need, please, please, please come talk to one of us here at Maro. And with that, that is it for today. We'll be back. If you do want to, get any kind of notifications from us or emails from us on future sessions or other AI governance and AI risk topics, we do have a newsletter. We ask that you subscribe. So thank you, everyone.
Bye.